right, well, I guess I'll start then. So here today, I am presenting on the Hyperledger project. Now, by like a show of hands, how many people here have heard of the Hyperledger project?
Woo!
All right. So it's not one of the super big names that you hear about in the news and stuff like that. Let's look into it a little bit. So, kind of to frame the whole project, you have to look at what exactly a blockchain is. And a lot of people are interested in kind of the cryptocurrency aspects, like the Bitcoin, etc., Ethereum. But at its core, a blockchain is kind of just a way to securely store information in an immutable ledger. But it's a lot like a database. Say it just is a database, a place for people to store information, whether that be transactions on the Bitcoin network, whatever you can imagine. Everyone likes databases. Everyone uses databases. There's databases in every aspect of our lives now as we digitalized. And there are a couple problems with the traditional database way of thinking. Those include stuff like permissions, where in your traditional database approach, you kind of have like layers of security and protection. You should theoretically only let certain people touch certain things, and a lot of times that works out just fine, but it's kind of like a layered approach where you have your traditional security stack involved. Identity, which is kind of like version control almost for the database, is you're going to have problems with knowing where exactly changes came from on a database. And again, there are solutions to these, but it's the stacked approach where you'll figure out some extra little things that have disputes. It comes down to a database was changed, and who changed the database, and who's actually correct in changing the database, who's telling the truth. And again, you can make solutions or at least ameliorate those kind of problems, but that's that like layered approach where you're stacking on like a little extra bit of software here and there. So then here comes the blockchain. Now the blockchain is a lot like a database, but obviously it solves those problems that we were talking about before, or at least to a very greater extent than a traditional database what it does. And it does it kind of from the ground up. It was built with those kind of problems in mind. That the Bitcoin project really is a good example of how you fix those kind of problems, because you have people who you can make, in a decentralized network, no one has control. People are making changes to the ledger, and you can verify that. It's great. Even though we all know blockchains solve a lot of problems, there also still are problems with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but a lot of those are scalability issues, which we see with a lot of different forks and projects. Bitcoin has a million different forks now, I can't even keep track. And Ethereum even has a couple of forks, and there are just new projects popping up every day that try and deal with that scalability issue. The traditional Bitcoin idea is that you have more nodes, and you're able to secure the network by having more nodes verify transactions. So actually, as you scale up your network, you get more and more security, more or less, depending on your consensus algorithm and stuff like that. But in general, that's true. But it also leads to less performance, which is actually, you could think of it as best case scenario, more nodes, you get the same performance. But in traditional enterprise architecture databases, when you distribute loads, you get better performance, which it's kind of counterintuitive coming from that more traditional side. You're putting all these machines on this problem, but in reality, things are slowing down because you have to do verifications, and it gets kind of messy. So, that's one of the theoretical problems, and again, you see that in different projects from different forms. I think Ethereum has a problem where, since the block time is so short, then you have uncle blocks, and it's kind of becomes a mess if you want to scale up Ethereum. You start running into problems where you can't compute, you can't verify the data on the chain. Problem. It's also looking at all of these different chains. Ethereum, Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Neo, any nonsense. You have all these different code bases, all these different ways of approaching the problem, kind of with the same solution, the blockchain solution, but it's difficult to see which ones actually are doing what they like claim to in a white paper. There's a bunch of different ways of going about these solutions, and it's kind of hard to peg down. Is this solution actually better for maybe your transaction throughput, if that's what you're looking at? Is that actually better, or, because it depends on what metric you're using to think about better. You could say how many blocks you put onto the chain. But that's not always, some blocks may be different than other blocks, with the block size to do, and stuff like that. And also, blockchain is being kind of in its infancy. It's not, what's like 10 years since the Bitcoin white paper was released.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Which 10 years is kind of a long time, but in reality, for something that's kind of so new and promising, because just like the internet, like nobody really knows how to get into the space. How do you start developing? How do you start using this for your business? Which is hopefully where a lot of businesses, are looking to go. And there's a myriad other potential problems that blockchain solutions pose. So then, in an attempt to fix or ameliorate, or at least address and look at these things from like a real business-oriented standpoint, the purpose was to increase cross-industry collaboration, which means all these different people are looking, finance, supply chain, logistics, everyone's looking at blockchain and saying, wow, we have these problems in our business. This is promising to solve them. Everyone keeps telling me, all the tech guys keep telling me this is going to solve our problems. But, everyone can kind of see there's a lot of stuff going on in the industry, and it's hard to sort through everything and exactly figure out where those promises are being fulfilled, where maybe people are fibbing a little bit to raise more funds for their project. And it's generally the Hyperledger project was born to get everybody from all these different industries to kind of like work together, share information and ideas, and perform, again, it's hard to test, to benchmark performance on blockchains because there's so many different blockchains out there. A big part of the project is actually just getting people to have the same kind of standardizing how do you test a blockchain for its performance, for its security, for all those things that we love blockchains for. And as I was talking about there, it's for business and enterprise use. It's not, Bitcoin is very libertarian and idealistic, and I love that, and Bitcoin's amazing for that. But there's also other applications, which more traditional finance, I should say, and supply chain and just the healthcare and stuff like that. There's a lot of potential uses, and right now we don't see those for the most part. There are a few things that are doing that, but that's why this was founded to help push that side of things along rather than the Bitcoin trading and all these altcoins. It's like, where can we put this into the big names, which is why there were all these companies that got together. And here actually, on the red screen, this is actually a list of the member companies. And see, IBM's probably, this is like their little brainchild. Obviously, it's part of the Linux Foundation, but IBM was one of the first people to give a big solid code base, which we'll talk about later. There's huge companies, American Express, Airbus. There's a lot of Chinese companies that I've never heard of. Cisco, Deutsche Bank, Daimler.
Dang.
Big names. IBM. Intel actually has another big code base.
Jeez.
Then there's smaller, not even necessarily smaller, but just less. They give the project less money. Blockchain.
We're just at the.
Yeah, we're just at the. Yeah, there's a lot of things, but there's other big names that give less for the project. And as you go down, you'll see a lot of things. And it is kind of. You'll see a lot of Chinese companies and U.S.-based Anglosphere companies. So there's a lot of different people out there who are interested in this, behind this, at varying degrees. And it's great in my opinion, because that shows that people are really interested in want those projects to succeed. And actually, there's academic associates, they call them, and there's the Penn State Blockchain Club, which I think we've like had some discourse with at some point. They're an academic associate, and Yale is part of this foundation. There's a lot of people who are into it. What is the actual Hyperledger project? What is it about? What does it do? Obviously, there's code involved at some point, or else it would be a real project. There's kind of like 3 separate things they focus on. The first of which being frameworks. Frameworks are basically just a code base for a blockchain. Bitcoin could be thought of as a framework, Ethereum is a framework, but those are actual implementations as well. These frameworks that the Hyperledger project works on, they are just the code. They are not the Hyperledger, they're not like a chain. That's not what the Hyperledger project is about.
Yes.
Bitcoin, yes.
Hey.
So the frameworks are a code base that they're pretty darn big now, and they have a few of them. And these are what kind of are the foundations, like Bitcoin or something like that. There are a lot of forks to Bitcoin. So let's start talking about Hyperledger Fabric. This was the original framework that they had. It was developed by IBM. This is kind of what kicked off this project being, something substantial.
What motivated IBM to create the Hyperledger?
They thought they could sell that to business. It's kind of like how they sell, databases now.
Like DB2, it's like, okay, so like another form of DB2 or something.
Database too.
Well, DB2 is their relational database.
Oh,
So, yeah.
yeah. It's just kind of what they think the future is, and especially for like supply chain and medicine industries, they think we can sell this. And so traditionally IBM does do kind of an open source model for some of their stuff. They run a lot of stuff on Linux and stuff, so they've traditionally supported Linux because it makes them money, because they can run services, run services and sell services. The reason why it's called like a framework is because you have plug and play components. And this means that it's developed with the idea that different businesses have different business needs. They might need high transaction throughput. They might just need super high security. There's a million different things that individual businesses can need. And the idea with the plug and play, the modularity, is that you can change hashing algorithms. You can change, the structure of blocks. You can change, how the consensus algorithm works. You can change, just a million things. Everything you can think of to change. They built this keeping in mind that you should be able to drag and drop components from different, for different business needs, and choose what works well for you, or if IBM's doing it, they choose what works well for you. And then they also have container technology called chain code, and chain code is supposed to be a better way to approach smart contracts. I don't really know much about the technicals, but it seems relatively interesting. I would like to look at that more in the future. And then we also have, this is another huge thing from Intel, Sawtooth. This is basically not the same thing, I shouldn't say, as the Fabric that we were looking at, but it's an alternative code base developed by Intel, and then they gave it to the Hyperledger Foundation. It does a lot of the same things. It's modular. That's part of like the Hyperledger Foundation's core values, is that you are establishing something that everybody across all industries can use, and it's not, you're not making a new Bitcoin or anything. You're making a set of tools that people can, bring into their more traditional businesses, or even, newer businesses that want to leverage blockchain technology, but you don't have to go through and, custom build all of your stuff. This is another really big project. There's a lot of lines of code to it, and a lot to it in general. And then there's a few more other than this frameworks. I think they have like 5 or 6 frameworks that you can choose from that different people in industry have developed and then given to the foundation. But I don't know how to say that. But this one's kind of cool because it has the ledger state is stored in a traditional database, Again, I don't know how they do that, but I believe them, because Hitachi working on it, they're pretty smart.
I'm guessing it's the translation where it's stored normally, but it's a normal blockchain and then translated into something that's parsable.
Yeah,
Probably what happens.
I think there's other, I don't know if I have them in this presentation, but there's other layers to this that they actually do that. For some reason, this might be different, but you might be right.
Okay, I see.
But that, for anybody who's worked in industry, it's a huge deal because of analytics and reporting. That is like half of what people do, I'm pretty sure, in business, is you just crunch numbers, you look at trends, you try and figure out, where is potential revenue coming from.
Right.
Look at the data, yeah. And this makes it so that people who are trained more traditionally to deal with SQL databases are able to do their analytics still, but you get all the benefits of a blockchain.
That's cool.
Stuff like that. So this is, I think, really cool and something that's kind of sorely needed if anyone's ever tried doing blockchain analytics. It's not that easy. And if you're, sometimes there's a benefit to that maybe if you're in the Bitcoin network, you're into the libertarian stuff. But if a business is implementing stuff on a blockchain, analytics is definitely, should be easy for them. And like I said, there's a good few more, I don't know, 5 or 6, and there's more popping up all the time. They have like an incubation stage of development where they kind of just like throw an idea out there. So there's a lot of things going on. And then kind of the second layer to their like stack, I guess you could call it, are their tools. And these are going to be things that theoretically and generally in practice they seem to be good about this, is that you can take one of those frameworks, you can build your own personal business chain on it, and then you can use any set of tools, regardless of what framework you use, you'll be able to use different tools from different projects, and you'll be able to, I guess we'll dive in and see exactly what we should be able to do here. So Hyperledger Composer is pretty popular. There's a lot of people talking about it. A lot of less tech-oriented people are very interested by it, with people who don't know as much about blockchain technology specifically, because you can, with like a GUI, so that's probably a big push. And I think like Waves is I don't know if that's the right one, but they had something like that, and there are a lot of ICOs coming out of that project because they had a GUI where you could spin up your own token in the blockchain. So this is basically a GUI and a set of tools that make it kind of simple, not totally simple, but so you can tie it into businesses where you don't have people who are super in-depth trained in the blockchain. You can spin up your own blockchain and you can make it shiny and do everything that you think you should need. And this is a very big project that people see a lot of people like IBM, because you wouldn't have to have everybody trained in the specific software or specific framework. You can just kind of throw a GUI at somebody who's kind of technically oriented, and you can spin up your own blockchain. Things going. Caliper. Now this ties into what I was talking about before, where you have all these disparate projects that you say Ethereum is better than Bitcoin at this, but it's kind of hard to judge that because Ethereum and Bitcoin do things differently. See? And that is one of the core founding principles of the Hyperledger Foundation, is that they're trying to fix that and let you really judge different projects based on what they're going to do for your specific application, and they're trying to make it easy so you can figure out where you want to go, where your business needs to go. And this is a set of tools that judges, there's a million different things that they judge. There's stuff like transaction throughput. They try and deal with it in a standardized way. You have industry partners, Oracle, IBM, Huawei, all kind of getting together and agreeing, like these are the metrics that we need to be looking at. And with this, you can kind of plug it into any of those frameworks, or they try and do it with other, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, those kind of code bases. They try and let you have a standardized benchmarking tool effectively. It's not super interesting, but at the same time, when you're thinking about it from a business perspective, it's very necessary, because how do you know, you need data to make decisions in business. How do you really get that good data? Caliber. Quilt is, I think, probably the coolest tool that they have, because it is something that I was interested in before I ever knew about it. It's basically atomic swaps, but it was originally founded to do atomic swaps between, you know, the Hyperledger frameworks and different blockchains developed with them. But they more recently, I think they almost like have it working to do atomic swaps with Ethereum and Hyperledger chains. And well, I don't know if they would call them atomic swaps necessarily, but that's a good way to think about it if you guys know what that is. That's when you take coins, your Ethereum coins, and you can actually just automatically trade them for Bitcoins. And that's something that people have kind of wanted for a long time, because right now you have solutions to fix that, but they are always the, what do you call them, like marketplaces, trading, like through a website. So you have a third party that you're going through, that you're trusting them. And this solves that effectively, especially right now it works with everything built on, with the Hyperledger framework, so it works on everything inside of that realm, and they're getting really close, if not, they're already there, to getting to work with Ethereum. I think is their big target, because there's a lot of ICOs tokens coming out of the Ethereum project. And interestingly, it was developed by Ripple, which is a cryptocurrency player. They're definitely more on the traditional, like, trusted chain side of things, so it makes sense that they would work on something like that. But it's something that is highly valuable, especially if you want to do transactions between businesses. You don't have to hack together some crazy solution. If you guys are all using, you know, kind of industry standard stuff like the frameworks or Ethereum, you can do transactions between businesses, and it's not the end of the world. And again, there are a lot more tools. There are more tools than frameworks, kind of intuitively. You can look into them, but I think those are the most interesting, kind of the most useful ones. And then, all right, so are people actually using this? And it turns out that people actually are. And this is a kind of like old, well, like I said, it was old news, but it's very interesting nonetheless. So this is, and I think some of you may have heard of this already, but Italian Stock Exchange to develop a Hyperledger-based blockchain shares platform. Now this is one of those sought after, very kind of intuitive applications that everyone's been trying to do, but that's where the traditional kind of hurdles with blockchain come into play. Scalability, security, and why these permissioned blockchains and stuff like that are interesting. So somebody in Italian Stock Exchange actually used the Hyperledger Foundation, the Hyperledger framework, to develop a way to tackle that problem. And there, I don't know if there's too much going on here, but they're working with IBM, and they'll be actually doing kind of what everyone dreamed of when blockchain first came around, trading real stocks with a blockchain, reducing overhead, which is obviously why blockchains are so sought after in these kind of markets. Could either deal with that traditional security stack we were talking about with a database, like everyone does now, or you can put it onto a blockchain. Just get rid of a ton of overhead, make things more efficient and more secure. So they are doing that.
So it actually saved them money? It saved them overhead costs when they did it?
I don't know exactly, but I think that it was more of a pilot program.
Right.
And they're still kind of feeling it out. But they crunched the numbers and they think that it should work. So
okay,
we'll find out.
That's cool.
Now this is just a list here. This is probably one of the critical points of this project, is that this is blockchain platform market shares shared in ICO. So that's how much money is actually running on these platforms for different tokens and applications, etc. And it was, up here is Ethereum, which is this giant bar. And then other custom platform waves, which I was talking about earlier, they kind of have that like GUI things, so you can make the Bitcoin forks, and then down here is Hyperledger. So actual market share for Hyperledger is about 1/3%, which isn't too great. This is for ICOs, which are initial coin offerings, like startups asking for funds, effectively like an IPO, not the traditional stock market. So this is kind of a different use than Hyperledger was maybe originally founded for. Obviously IBM and Intel have given huge amounts of code, and they're not going to do an ICO because they already did an IPO and they have plenty of funds, and that would become sketchy. So this shows that people do actually use Hyperledger though for little side projects for starting up companies and stuff. People are using it. It's not the most difficult thing to get into. There's some other kind of like higher market cap. Not that Hyperledger has a market cap, but Neo and EOS, I don't know if they're actually still high market cap, but those are pretty big projects that people liked at one point. And now Hyperledger is actually doing better than that. So people are using it. Oh, and this is again one of those like really intuitive. Everybody wants to do it. Everyone sees that potential, but I forget which bank this is. The Royal Bank of Canada, which is a very large Canadian bank, is actually trying to settle things, or I think they are doing it now. They're using it for U.S. Canadian settlements. So instead of going through, I don't even know what the traditional way to do that kind of cross-currency stuff, they decided to put it on a blockchain, and it seems to be working. I know they're still doing this, so it works. And yeah, so people find a business use for it. It's apparently lower overhead, like you were saying. It does work for these people. I know that because they're still doing it, and I don't think they would keep doing it if it didn't make them money.